Welcome to the Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Meeting of the Board of School Directors, Monday, May 11th. I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Marseille. Do I need to do public comment first? No, do that. Okay, so I want to recognize for public comment right now. I know there's some students who wanted to speak to the board, and I wanted to have them speak first, so we don't have to have them stay for the entire term of the meeting. So I'd like to invite them forward if they're here. Awesome, come on up. Thank you for being here. And when you get to the mic, if you could tell us your name and generally where you reside in the district and what school you're at.
Good evening. My name is Ben Folds, and I'm a junior at Harridan High School. I've been involved in high school sailing for 2 years, a total of 5 seasons. On April 10th, we, together with our parents, submitted a letter to the Lower Merion School Board of School Directors concerning our application for a high school sailing club. As we assume you already have read the details, I will highlight a few of the most important points and share my thoughts about the program. This proposal is to be able to operate under the Harridan High School and Lower Merion High School names as an unofficial club. The activity will be funded by parents and guardians, and transportation will also be provided by the parents and guardians. 19 schools have participated in high school sailing in this area over the past 2.5 years. 13 of these schools are participating during the current spring season, including Conestoga High School and Radnor High School from our own Central League. Without the use of school names, there are 2 essential things we cannot do. First and most importantly, we cannot sail interscholastically in district, regional, or national regattas through ISSA, High School Sailing's governing body. And second, we cannot effectively advertise to potential new student members. We cannot be a part of school activity fairs, we cannot use rooms at either high school for interest meetings, we cannot be included in school announcements, and we cannot post in school newsletters easily. Sailing is unique in that it is considered the only high school interscholastic sport that is co-ed. Competitive sailing requires tactical and strategic thinking as much, if not more than, physical ability. Physical stature is less of a differentiator as much small boat racing becomes more inclusive. Sharing practice sessions with other high schools is also unique, providing the students with the opportunity to form new friendships and community connections. I love sailing and have been doing it for most of my life. I appreciate that high school sailing gives me the opportunity to learn, improve, and compete outside of the summer months that I have to sail. I like sailing with my friends, and I love the competition. I like that high school sailing lets me compete as part of a team, whereas in the summer I compete mostly as an individual. And finally, high school sailing prepares me for competitive college sailing, which is based on the same format, team-based and short courses, which is very different than my summer regatta sailing. Over the course of my high school career, I've sailed in both fall and spring, and I've loved it very much. It's been one of my favorite activities that I've been a part of at Harridan High School over other sports that I play. And it's just been an amazing experience for me, and it would be great if we could get it to a point that we could get more members and sail in bigger regattas. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jack Dans, and I'm a freshman at Lower Merion High School, and I live in Narberth. And I'm just here to say that I love sailing, and I think it's a great sport. And I think all of us here would agree that we love sailing, and we thoroughly enjoy our time on the water and the time we spend in our sailboats. And another great part of this program is that I've made friends with people in my school district, these 3 people here, standing to my right, and a lot of friends from neighboring school districts, such as Conestoga. And I would love for other students to be able to get involved in this program and have as much fun as we do out on the water on Sundays and during the weekdays. So if you will please consider us for a club status. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angela Brune, and I'm an 11th grader at Harriton High School. I joined sailing not having any expectations whatsoever of what it would be like, and my friend Sarah actually encouraged me to join, and I was up for the challenge. I figured it's something new, and I wanted to try it. And I played sports before at Harriton. I played soccer and track and field, and my experience with sailing has been more than fulfilling, and I have loved it so much because not only do you get to make your own decisions while using your surroundings, such as the boat, having to understand the boat, the wind, and the water, and there's so much strategy involved in sailing, and there's also so much independence because the coach has no influence over your decisions on the boat. And no other sport requires you to think independently and compete at the same time because your coach can pull you out right away in soccer or track and field and tell you exactly what you've been doing wrong, whereas in sailing you have to continue using what you know to sail. And I think that Lower Merion School District should definitely consider creating this a club because it teaches us many lessons that other sports don't, and it can help us with other aspects of life as well, such as making decisions, strategy, and independence that a lot of other students can benefit from. And I'm requesting the board to make sailing an official club within the Lower Merion School District. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sarah Keefe. I'm also a junior at Harriton. Over the last 3 years, I've participated in other sports, but this is my first season sailing. I'm so happy that I decided to sail because it's just so much fun. Our sailing coach always mentions that this is the only sport in high school where girls and boys can compete together, but it's also the only sport that allows us to practice with other schools. It's a great experience to be able to meet students from other schools in the area. If we were able to compete as a Harriton/Lower Merion team, more students will be able to enjoy this experience. Thank you for allowing us to speak with you tonight.
Thank you.
Also, can you please build Lower Merion High School a baseball field? If
One request at a time, please.
if you build it, they will come. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Zay Smolar. I'm a senior at Lower Merion, and I'm one of the co-editors-in-chief of the Marionite, and I'm here representing our staff. Just our staff. As the year comes to a close and we only have really one issue left with content besides our matriculation issue in June, we actually go to print on Wednesday, and we were sort of hoping that we could get an update on the superintendent search progress and something that we could publish new for this coming issue in May. We published last issue an update, but it would be nice to do some more. And we appreciate the need for confidentiality throughout the search and sort of the need for it for all the applicants and the district as a whole. But we also feel like we'd like some transparency and be able to have an update for our last issue. So for our community and for the students at Lower Merion and just throughout the district. Thank you.
Thank you for the request. There is some update information on the website. If you could share your contact information with Ms. LaPera, I'll make sure that that gets communicated, and I'd be glad to touch base with you as I have been chair of the search.
Okay,
Thank you for the comment. And thank you, students, for telling us how much you want a sailing club. We're excited about the possibilities. The administration has been working really vigilantly on the request. In fact, we spent quite some time in policy on Friday talking with your parents about the logistics and what that looks like from the district side. Our issue right now is making sure everyone's safe. And so we want to let you know we certainly will do all that we can to attempt to honor the request. Dr. Marseille, did you want to touch base on anything?
No, thank you for coming up and really advocating for a sport that has touched you in so many ways. As a former track athlete, I'd love to find out how I can transfer some of those. Maybe I need to find sailing as another sport as I'm looking for something else. Anything transferable to track, I'm willing to try. But I do want to thank you, and to echo really Dr. Van Lynch's statements that we have heard. Administration was aware that one of the biggest impediments was really around the insurance, even though I'm sure your parents can list other impediments that they had to go through that process. But now that we're optimistically over that hump, we are really excited and confident that we can move forward and grant that once you go through the process.
Great.
So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. While we're on public comment, if there is any member of the public that would like to speak at this time, you're welcome to. If you can sign in with Ms. LaPera. Okay, thank you. And now I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Marseille. Thank you.
Well, I know that there's been a lot of conversation last year, this year, but I actually have to go back and say there's been numerous conversations. But I think this year, across the country, and obviously Lower Merion, there's been a major concern around the overemphasis on testing. And we've been having very deliberate conversations. Our strategic plan really talk about looking at that very differently. And I know that the Legislative Committee, under the leadership of Dr. O'Leary, has been spending a lot of time with our legislators hosting conversations. And many of those conversations, besides school funding and all sorts of other wonderful items, is really about testing and standardized testing. So I know at this time, Dr. Van Lynch, along with the rest of the board, is very interested and sharing with the public how they feel about that. And with that, I'll pass it off to you, Dr. Van Lynch.
Thank you. I'd like to pass it actually to Dr. O'Leary because she's done the lion's share of the work, and so she has convened the committee and stayed on top of the board to ensure that we kept our commitment to limited standardized testing on the radar. And so it was a good opportunity at an education meeting to have the discussion with the board and also with the public, and also to have Dr. O'Leary give us some overview of the work that was done in committee. And then once that is complete, we will read a resolution that will be formally voted on at the Monday, May 18th board meeting. So I'll turn it over to Dr. O'Leary.
Thank you. I think early in the year, the Legislative Committee met and decided that we wanted to make sort of a clarifying statement on standardized testing. I think the board and the administration's been consistent in its view that there's too much standardized testing, but we sort of wanted to consolidate everything into one statement. And one of the important reasons for doing that is so that we can then pass that statement as sort of an official statement on to legislators and other interested parties. So I'm going to read the statement, and I apologize because it has whereases and therefores and be it resolved, and it makes it less elegant. However, here is our proposed.
Before we read the statement, is there anybody from the committee that would like to share their perspective before we actually go forward with reading with reading the resolution itself? Please.
Not to belabor the point, but I really wanted to thank Maureen for her leadership on this issue, and also the whole board for being engaged. I think a lot of us feel, as Dr. Marseille mentioned earlier, pretty strongly about identifying this as a challenge in terms of the type of education we're trying to deliver in the Lower Merion School District. And as part of our strategic plan, we really are trying to highlight opportunities to create as much self-directed and creative learning in the classroom as we can. And I think this will continue to be an important issue as there's no imminent change on the horizon. I also wanted to commend Dr. Marseille and the other administrators in the schools who had to quickly and I think efficiently manage a huge number of kids and families who opted out of the PSSAs this year. And I think this will be a continual aspect of what we're faced with. So in any case, thanks again for moving the process forward and highlighting this as an issue. I think it's important for Lower Merion as an educational leader to take a stand on this, and I'm glad we're doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pollard?
I was going to also say, we felt that because we are Lower Merion and so many school districts look up to us for the things that we do and the decisions that we make, we felt that it was necessary for us to make a statement is where we stood on standardized testing. So that was another force for having us to do the resolution.
All right, so here it is. Whereas, in the Lower Merion School District, we believe our top priority is the personalized education of every student every day, and it is difficult to measure factors that we consider to be essential, like the dedication of our teachers, the rigor and breadth of our academic offerings, the opportunities for co-curricular exploration, the level of parental engagement, and this community's commitment to public education. And whereas the Board of School Directors for the Lower Merion School District understands the value of some limited standardized testing and will continue to present these tests to students as mandated by law. And whereas the Lower Merion School District routinely provides its own assessments that engage students and provide critical and timely feedback to teachers and administrators. And whereas the Lower Merion School District routinely engages in its own programs of teacher assessment that provide critical and timely feedback to teachers and administrators. And whereas the Board of School Directors of a Lower Merion School District is very concerned with the resources being diverted to standardized testing in classrooms and in districts across the state, and the overuse of standardized tests which disproportionately impact our most vulnerable children, minority students, low-income students, special needs students, as well as students who do not speak English as their first language, particularly when those tests are used to determine ranking, admission, and graduation of students, or to evaluate teachers and school staff and overall school performance. And whereas the Board of School Directors continues to oppose state mandates that require Keystone exams in all Pennsylvania public schools as graduation requirements, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of School Directors of a Lower Merion School District asks its community to continue to define success for ourselves and our children in a way that celebrates curiosity, goal setting, academic risk-taking, along with more traditional accomplishments. And be it further resolved that the Board of School Directors of the Lower Merion School District calls upon its teachers and administrators to remain focused on quality teaching of quality content and to minimize time spent on preparation for standardized testing. And be it further resolved that the Board of School Directors of the Lower Merion School District calls upon its legislators to strive to minimize the amount of mandated testing and the use of standardized testing for teacher and school evaluation and as graduation requirements.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary, and thank you to our legislative committee and board colleagues for this important resolution. Again, we will read it at our Monday, May 18th meeting and formally adopt it by board vote. So with that, we will move on to our presentation from our guests.
Thank you very much. On April 27th, Montgomery County Planning Commission presented their full report on enrollment growth in the district. As you remember, for those sitting around to my left and to my right, and many of those in the audience, the 47 slides. And we wanted to be very deliberate in terms of the information that we wanted to provide to the community and to the board with our most recent enrollment study. It's no surprise that this district continues to be a destination of choice. Because of that, requires this analysis every 3 years. And I wanted Montgomery County Planning Commission to once again come to one of our board meetings, and this time really give us a overview of the April 27th presentation. It will not be 46 slides. Those slides are posted on our website, but I really did want them to come in and A, remind us why they're here, B, talk about the factors that they see that contributes to ongoing enrollment growth, share with us some of the recommendations or the numbers that speak to that growth, and then really the recommendations for next steps and further analysis. So with that, I'd like to have Scott come to the microphone and give us an overview of the presentation that is available on the website in its entirety. But this shorter presentation will also be available as well.
Thank you, Dr. Marcel. And yes, it's only 10 slides. Yes, we will keep very brief and just go over the, again, the major findings of the report for you here. We are Montgomery County Planning Commission. This is the 6th district we have studied in depth in the last 3 years, although we've been doing demographic and data analysis and projecting and other facets for quite some time. With Lower Merion, I think we mentioned in the beginning when we were talking to staff here that this would probably be our most intense effort to date on looking at a school district, and it certainly was. A lot of that's due to the unprecedented amount of data that we had, and we've gone through a lot of that, but being able to boil it down to school boundaries, looking at births, county records of housing sales, construction, combining that with the district's records on address has really allowed for, like I said, an unprecedented level of detail. And with that, we implemented the cohort progression model, which is kind of industry standard for a district like Lower Merion. It's also the model we've used for our other studies, and the state uses statewide for looking at districts throughout. With it, we identified the most important elements we thought that were attributed to the most recent growth, and obviously that jumped out at us right away, how the district has gained over 1,000 students in the last 5 years, which really isn't typical to what we've seen in other areas of the county at this point. Couple that with the fact that population has actually declined since 2000 a little bit, was also made it even more remarkable. We looked at the birth activity, which is one of your main culprits in looking at districts as far as growth goes. But again, a downward trend, which is typical. Most areas have gone down in the last 5 years or so. In terms of births, Lower Merion, not quite as much as some of the other areas in county-wide, but still it was a downward trend there. So no growth pressures from added birth activity were happening either. So although while we noticed or observed that, we also note that regional and countywide we're starting or expecting to see an uptick in the number of women of childbearing age, and this mostly coming out of what's now called the millennial generation. This will start replacing what have been lower numbers at that level over the last 10 years. So it's not going to happen immediately, and we don't know how much it'll affect Lower Merion and Narberth at this time because there's so many other factors at work with people moving in and out. But in general, in 5 to 10 years, we expect to see more women of childbearing age in the county and region. So long term, that could be an added pressure that won't show up for a while. One of the first factors one that we've brought to your attention quite prominently during this whole process is the fact that there is a lower percentage of children choosing private school over public school in the Lower Merion School District, and that is much lower than it was 10 years ago. And we've talked about how that's really had an impact on the students coming into the system. A lot of those choices are being made before they start the school system. We don't see the evidence that they're coming above the second grade during school. That has actually declined at least the last 4 years. So that's one of the prime factors for recent growth at that level, but certainly not the only one. Housing construction has been steady, but a dramatic number of multifamily apartment units are in the pipeline. So we've talked about the adjustments being made to the model because we simply haven't had the construction yet. Some people are kind of already counting on it or factoring it in, saying, oh, that's what's causing some of the growth, but there's over 2,000 units that have not been built yet. Some are under construction, but we think most of them are likely to be built over the next 5-6 years. So we built that in. The impact is not as significant as it may be anticipated with a number like 2,000 units, but nonetheless, there is an impact, and we accounted for that. More public students are originating from existing multifamily developments in the past. So you're seeing more so apartment rentals where there's more public students coming out of them. Some of this may be due to cultural changes, immigrants coming in and being more receptive to living as a family in those type of units. You also see it as a lower barrier of entry for people trying to get into the district that may not be ready or able to afford some of the housing ownership opportunities in the district. And then housing sales have been rebounding the last couple of years from what was a historical drop after the bubble burst last decade. This churning of households, we have evidence through the analysis showing a larger net gain in public students than in the past. And interesting, I'll just add, we just finished our median housing price report for 2014, and we actually saw the number drop a little bit from last year. So while they had been going up, they're not continuing to go up, at least for 2014. Now, we'll see what happens in 2015, but I'll return to that as we talk about the adjustments. And so those three factors that just showed up in red there, we've, again, pointed to in the past of being three of the major factors to explain some of the past growth. But I don't want to dismiss, and I again want to bring to your attention, the overall appeal of the district, and that people are moving in and out, and more particularly in with families, to take advantage of what is a wonderful opportunity. It's a great school district. The area itself has a lot going for it. People want, have the suburban benefits, but they also have the urban amenities as well of public transit, walkability, being able to get to downtown Philly very quickly, and also being close proximity to a lot of employment centers. So it's kind of a perfect storm of desirable places going on in Lower Merion and the school district. So we developed the three projection scenarios, which the board is very familiar with by now. And they were based on both the base model of the cohort progression method with various parameters set up to reflect what we thought was happening. And then assumptions were made and adjustments were made. There were two adjustments made across all three projections. Those were for the multifamily construction that's expected, and also for the number of students coming from existing multifamily developments, and that number continuing to increase. So we made those adjustments in all three scenarios simply because we really thought they were unavoidable and destined to happen. With the option one, the high projection, we made a couple of other assumptions that we thought, in case they happened, here's what the result would be. One was that housing sales would continue to increase, and I just told you how, at least for 2014, we're not seeing that. We didn't think we would see that. We thought it would stay pretty stable. It may still go up, but I don't think to the levels where it was back in 2005, 2006. So that's one of the reasons why option one's not our recommended model. But another possibility that happens under option one is that birth activity increases over the next 5 years. Again, we're not vouching that it will. I think ultimately it's likely to increase, but I don't know if it's going to happen that suddenly or quickly. Option two is our recommended option. This sticks with the two base adjustments that we made to all three scenarios and doesn't make any other adjustments. It counts on the recent trends for all the other factors and carries them out through the model. Option three is the low projection, and this also has the two adjustments included in all three. But then a third adjustment where we used a different period of progression rates in the model. And I won't get into the details of progression rates and all that we went through last time, but essentially we're accounting for trends over the last 9 years rather than the last 6 years. And the main impetus for doing this is to try to capture more so of students, a greater percentage of students choosing private school over public school than is happening currently. Again, not to the same level as 10 years ago, but an increase nonetheless. Therefore, by dealing with the progression rates, we're also adjusting other trends within that, again, over a 9-year period where those first 3 years may have had a less impact or less growth activity as a result, factoring in over the entire span. So what will happen? In summary, we see growth continuing under any scenario. The lower grades are stocked pretty full right now with high enrollments, as you know, and those students aren't going anywhere. They'll continue through the system and go through the middle school and high school in the coming years, and that in itself will cause growth. What happens behind them is, again, dependent on what scenario you see happening. If they continue as is, there could be more growth at that level. But the trends that created this growth we think are still in play for the most part, as is the appeal of the district that I just spoke of and its competitive advantages. New multifamily construction and the growing popularity of existing rental properties bring additional growth pressures to this, and that's accounted for in the model. So under the recommended scenario, option 2, we have the district growing by another 1,250 students over the next 10 years. Growth will hit high schools the hardest, with just over 1,000 students added. Middle schools will also increase by 300 students. But elementary schools have almost peaked. They are still, I think, going to grow in the next couple of years, but then they should start declining again. And over the 10-year period, possibly even be lower than what they are today. Not all buildings are going to be affected equally, so again, the report differentiates the growth in each school building. So again, I just want to go through the, not go through, but pull up the tables for the 3 different school levels and just make 2 or 3 points here. With elementary schools, again, you see the widest variety or differentiation between the 3 options. In the middle, option 2, you have only gaining 18, but still having growth over the next 2 years at least. But in the lower projection, you see a sharper decline down to 196. We don't think that's going to happen. That's why option 2 is recommended. But if there were a sudden uptick, more of entering kindergarten and first graders, we're going to private school instead of public school, then that could be the result. In the long term, you have a little bit more decline over the next 5 years under options 2 and 3. But under the high growth scenario where births pick up, you will still see growth through that second 5-year period. Again, we recommend the middle option. In the high school summary, which I put before middle school because I wanted to get to its impact right away because this is one of the most significant points, under each scenario, high, medium, or low, you still have a significant amount of growth. And so basically what I'm saying is even under the low projection, you're looking at 776 students over 10 years. So while the 1,000 is quite imposing, I think it's interesting to note that the growth here is more certain, if you want to put it that way. And the levels are more significant, most likely. But so again, you only see a difference of or less than 250, but it is high enough, I think, to warrant consideration. And in the middle school, comes somewhere in between. You do have growth at all 3 levels again, not as much, and the low projection only has 121 overall, but a lot of that comes from a significant decrease in the second 5 years, which is less certain, of course, in the way the projections work. But I'll leave it at that. And then finally, you saw this slide last time. Again, it puts into context both the DeJong-Healy findings of 3 years ago, our findings under option 2 in the blue, and the actual results that have happened the last 3 to 4 years. And again, you see where DeJong was close, but a little bit under, and especially on the elementary school level, and how that's impacted our numbers really to verify that growth will be higher than what they were projecting for the, I guess, years 4 through 10 at the time. And that shows up in this comparison. So our recommendation, I think as Dr. Marcel said, we believe that given the growth that are shown in these projections and the numbers that are quite high, especially with what's already happened, we believe the districts should be planning now for the potential impacts of that growth and in whatever form of planning that be or is necessary. Because, again, the demographic factors and the things that are looked at within the report, we feel that these can be monitored on an annual basis and recommend that district and staff, and there's always the County Planning Commission to check in on some of the figures as well. Will help you gauge as you move forward and have those paths to cross over the decision-making process. So we hope that it's an annual update as far as decision-making goes, but we also encourage another study in 3 years, again, to verify and make sure that whatever path you're on is continuing. That is the end of my report.
Can I open it up for questions from the board at this time for our presenters? Please.
I just want to thank you for the brevity of that report.
I have the old one still here if you want to go back and, okay.
Yeah, thank you again for the amount of work and effort that you all put into this. It really was a carefully thought out report. I have a comment that I'd like you to comment on. You mentioned that 5 years ago, or I'm sorry, that projections 5 years out, especially in the elementary school, is extremely difficult to predict. So 10 years ago, more like 12 years ago, when the district was going through its renovations and its building, it was predicting out based on 5 years previous of falling enrollments. And as a result, I know that there's been a lot of criticism recently about the fact that the elementary school buildings weren't built big enough and that the high school buildings are no longer considered big enough for the projections moving forward. 10 years ago, do you think you would have been able to predict the amount of enrollment growth that we've had over the last 5 to 8 years? I mean, considering that the previous 6, the enrollments had been falling.
Right.
I know that puts you on the spot, so you don't really have to respond unless you feel. I guess the point that I'm making.
For the record, we would have been perfect, but
we should have thought of.
No, I'll be.
You're probably still in
honest
graduate school.
That there are when you around 2006 or so. Looking at the trends that were happening then, they weren't as strong as they developed from 2008 to today, and that's, I think, just looking at the numbers, I think that's evident. So they're probably, I think most models would have underpredicted what actually happened if they were going right at that time.
Well, they were actually going before that. That was more like 2002, 3, 4 when those projections were being put in place.
Yeah, I mean, the further you go back, I'm less certain of how I would react. But I know at that time, or prior to 2008, there was a challenge.
I think the point that I'm trying to make is 10 years out, our buildings fit the students that we have, or at least at the high school level. Moving out, they may not, and we need to address that. But it is a difficult thing to do, predict the future. But as I said before, I think you guys did as well a job as one could hope. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up on that. I just want to emphasize Scott's point of revisiting this, I think, on an annual basis, just to see where things are going. We'd be happy to run those numbers for you, no charge or anything like that for doing that. So, just to see what the trends are doing. So we're happy to do that, and we're doing that for another school district now, just so you're staying on top of things. So I think it's very important in a time of change that you are in to really stay on top of these types of numbers. So,
Okay, please.
I want to thank you as well, and I really, appreciate all the work you've put in and all the ways in which this is a strong report, and in which, I think that it's important to recognize that, Dr. Marseille had the foresight to request the board to do this report at the, again, at the suggestion of Dijon Healy, and that the previous administration as well had the foresight to ask for, external consultants. And there was a lot of consternation about, the previous numbers, but clearly those numbers have held up. And that it's important that we be actually, using expert consultants to be doing our long-term, predictions in order to be able to have the most accurate as possible. And I think we need to be planning on the basis, of these numbers, recognizing that you have to plan long-term, and at the same time recognizing that trends, shift, but that I think we do not, or certainly I think most of us do not want to be caught in a situation in which we are not able to educate our children in the ways in which we are accustomed to, in terms of programming, in terms of facilities, in terms of extracurricular activities. And again, this of course gets tied to our budget discussion, which we've been having frequently, and that we have been trying very hard to manage our budget at the time that we have increasing enrollments, and want to be able to provide the education that we believe our students deserve. So I just want to thank the administration for that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert, Diane. Other comments, questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Dr. Marseille?
I like these quick baton pass-offs. Because I'm going to
keep taking it back.
No, it's okay. Because I'm going to pass it off to Mrs. Hockfield, who's done a phenomenal job in helping us think more critically around the areas around the focus areas around the strategic plan. And what Ms. Hockfield, her team, the high school principals and middle school principals are going to do is really speak true to what this community and what this board has asked for us to think about with this 5-year strategic plan. And that is really, without creating an itemized list, asking us to think differently about time. Time from the perspective of the school calendar, time from the perspective of some meaningful conversations that hopefully we will have, I believe we will, around start time. We had that last year with Dr. Owens providing us with that information, so I'm looking forward to that deep, rich conversation. But really, time for collaboration and time that supports not only enrichment remediation, but holistic needs of students. So these principals who are going to be speaking to you today have really taken to heart the strategic plan and tried to, I'm going to encourage some prototyping for next year that we're really excited about. So with that, can I pass it off to Ms. Hockfield? Thank you. Can you reach the mic, Ms. Hockfield? Can I?
Never gets old.
I want to help
really.
you out. Thank you. I'm just trying to be helpful. Unlike Chris, who's very helpful.
Unlike the help we need. There we go. I'm going to do that. Good evening. And thank you for having us present tonight. It actually feels like it's on the earlier side. We do not have anywhere near 74 slides. What I want to talk to you about tonight, and I'm going to pass it off pretty quickly to the 4 secondary principals who are here, is the way that we've been thinking differently, as Dr. Marseille said, about time, about the needs of students, about what makes a really good school day for kids. And what I think we have to remember through this presentation is that all kids, as we know, learn differently. But what we're trying to do is provide what is the optimal experience developmentally for our middle school students and for our high school students. And I think you'll see when the principals are speaking that is different depending on where students are developmentally. So, as you know, for the last several years at both the middle and high school level, there's time in the day called academic recovery. So what you're going to hear first tonight is a little change in the name. The name academic recovery came about, I don't remember how. And I think I'd be making it up, and I could probably come up with a good story. But I'm not sure how we came up with the name academic recovery, and if anyone remembers that, they're welcome to address that. But when we thought about the name, and I actually looked up today the definition of recovery, the act or process of recovering, restoration to a former or better position, the regaining of something that is lost. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We're asking our students at the end of the day to recover something they lost, to regain something. It really feels like a very negative term. And we've talked a lot about our language, and I think the strategic plan has really caused us to think so deeply about the language that we use. That term academic recovery doesn't really do justice to that 25 minutes that we give to students every day, because not all students are recovering anything. There are many students who need enrichment during that time. There are students who just need a quiet place to do some work. And even those students who need some intervention, whether that's small or large, it's not really the act of recovering. So one of the things that I think the strategic plan has done is it's caused us to think about the language that we use. The term that we've come up with, and again, just through a lot of talking this year, is learn. And what I like, and I think what the high school and middle school principals and assistant principals and teachers like about that The definition of learn, to acquire knowledge of or skill in by studying, instruction, or experience, to become informed or acquainted with. Learn can mean any number of things. It's what students do to acquire information. It's what they do to help them experience something. So I think that the word learn makes more sense. What you're going to hear tonight is a progression from middle school, where we're going to call, hopefully, this learn, and in high school, lunch and learn. And I think the principals will do a real nice job explaining to you that progression. I also love the fact that we're going to learn in middle school, and then we're going to lunch and learn in high school. So for our students who require food to learn, they're going to have that during the high school time. The strategic plan, and I think if you've thought about some of the presentations that Dr. Doria and the supervisors and I have done all year, I've overused the umbrella. And I think Dr. Doria has pointed that out to me. In every presentation, I've said, let's use the umbrella for the strategic plan. Because I really believe, and we believe, that it's kind of framed everything we've done this year. And there's no conversation that we've had with supervisors, with building administrators, with students, with parents, that we haven't said the strategic plan is really the umbrella that we're working under. And I think when you hear the presentation tonight, it speaks to redefining success for students. It speaks so beautifully to what Dr. O'Leary read on behalf of the board tonight, that resolution, which is students are so much more than just a test score, and providing them the right amount of time in the day to do whatever they need to learn really makes a lot of sense to us, and it's really how we came to this presentation. Transformative curriculum, it obviously speaks to our curriculum. It speaks to teachers collaborating with one another. So again, and maybe it'll be the last umbrella this year, the strategic plan really speaks to everything that we've done all year. So it's really fitting that this is in May, because it's been the culmination of a year. Dr. Marseille has heard on many, many Thursdays during cabinet about this idea and about the research we have done around it, about the people we've spoken to about it, about the learning journey that we took to see it in action. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it first over to the middle school principals, Chris Hall and Jason Ponton, who are going to talk to you about the middle schools, how this will look in the middle schools, and then we'll proceed to talk about the high schools.
Good evening. Good evening. Both middle schools have a really long-held, firmly established tradition of working really effectively as interdisciplinary teacher teams. And in fact, I would venture to say that most people most closely associate middle school with that awesome best practice. 4 strong educators that represent 4 different disciplines coming together on a daily basis to think about the whole child and to really provide supports to ensure that all children have opportunities to learn optimally. And what Jason and I have been looking to do in the past 2 years is to really augment our middle school program by providing opportunities for teachers to meet on a weekly basis to come together as intra-disciplinary teams, opportunities for teachers that teach the same courses to come together to support one another instructionally. The first thing that we look to do is to provide a really consistent protocol for how teachers might work best in interdisciplinary teams. And so we gave math teachers, for example, an opportunity to sit down alongside one another on a weekly basis to interpret standards, to write learning targets, to agree upon what high levels of learning might look like for students at each grade level. And this is in our effort to ensure that we have high standards and high expectations for all students. And those teachers ultimately look to develop common assessments that they administer on a fairly regular basis as they look to plan to ensure student learning. The second phase of the cycle that we look to familiarize teachers with is the teach phase, which is the action research phase, where we allow individual teachers to go back to their individual classrooms and teach in their own unique ways, and really, demonstrate all the awesome expertise and their unique teaching styles, and look to ensure that all students learn in their own classrooms. Ultimately, they come back on a weekly basis and they check in with one another to determine which students have demonstrated learning and which students have not. And that's where the magic really happens, because teachers have an opportunity to support one another and share best practices across a grade level. This helps us to ensure that regardless of which 6th grade math teacher we have or which 8th grade science teacher we have, all students in the building can get the benefit of the best teaching strategies that exist within that building. And the fourth and final phase in that cycle is, well, what do we do about that information we gain about which students have learned and which students have not? That's the ACT phase. And that's what we're going to be talking to you about this evening. How are we going to look to support and empower our teachers to support all of our students over the course of the next 2 years? We want to get really, really good about using the information about student learning that we get to ensure that every child that demonstrates mastery has an opportunity to shoot for the stars and to be enriched on a daily basis through academic recovery. And also, for students that fall short of grade level expectations, that there's an opportunity to provide scaffolded support for them so that they can be pre-taught or they can be retaught, whatever might be necessary to ensure that they meet their potential. At Welsh Valley specifically, during the current year, the foundation is described right up here on this slide. Essentially, what we've been looking to do is to prioritize the identification of essential learning for all grade levels, for all courses, and that really becomes the foundation for using academic recovery really well. How can we provide effective enrichment or effective intervention to students that might need it during academic recovery if we don't know what we believe to be most important for students to learn, what's essential, and we don't have a good read on what students should demonstrate mastery of? This allows us to use it in a really specific way. What we're looking to do as this year wraps up is also to augment our program by identifying grade level appropriate study skills. Show me a middle school student that comes into middle school with awesome study skills, and I'll look to clone them, and I'll look to bottle up whatever those parents have done and those elementary teachers have done. But I must tell you, more often than not, our middle schools, the average middle school student has a lot of growth to experience in terms of independent learning and independent study skills. What we're looking to do at each grade level is to allow teacher teams to come together to determine what would be grade level appropriate study skills so that they can reinforce those study skills across all of their content area classes. That we believe will give students the best chance of being able to apply these strategies as they come up through the grades. During the upcoming school year, we'll look to build upon that really strong foundation, and as Dr. Marseille said, we will look to allow teacher teams, as they feel comfortable, to prototype the use of that more effective instruction during academic recovery. We will look as administrators to provide supervisory support to students, large groups of students, so that small groups of students can meet with teachers to get intervention or get enrichment. Ultimately, we're looking to just clear the runway for teachers and make it more easy for them to get access to students that they need to work with, and also just make it easier and less frustrating for them to do the work that they do best, which is teach and work with our students. During the 16-17 school year, we'll look to learn from the prototypes from our teacher teams across the building and look to really scale some of those best practices from individual teacher teams across the entire building and really look toward full school implementation of some of the best practices that we learn about through prototyping.
Good evening. So at Ballackinwood Middle School, as Chris has said, we've been working together for the past 2 years with regard to our program and our teachers working together, so you're going to see a lot of the same language. Again, building on the foundation that we've had in terms of identifying learning and the common assessments and working through the cycle, we've done a lot of work in terms of looking at our schedule and making sure that all of our teachers have the opportunity to meet, again, both inter and intradisciplinary through the cycle. What we've spent more time on and what a difference is this year at Ballackinwood is we've had a group of teachers who have taken the work and the training that they've attended, and they've begun to sample or prototype for themselves within their own teams more effective use of the academic recovery time. by having within their teams distribution of students to other places so that they can work with those students that they feel they need. And we've had a number of teachers who have done that this year, and they've seen a real benefit for that. So as we move forward, our plan is to prototype the scheduled academic recovery time learn throughout next year as a building, where we are doing this with all teams across all disciplines to allow, again, for more focused time with students to work on enrichment, intervention, as well as give students choice in terms of looking at what they need. Again, you'll see some of the common language between Bala Cynwyd and Welsh Valley. We have not begun to look necessarily at the study skills, but we plan to do that next year. And again, becoming more common across the teams, and then again, looking forward to next year and then the year beyond, putting those in place across the school as well. So as the teachers began to sample in their interdisciplinary teams this attempt at using academic recovery time more effectively to really focus with the students on what they're doing, they came to me, and many of these teachers were a part of my faculty leadership team, and they've participated in various trainings, and they really saw the benefit for the students with regard to what the students were doing during the time, but they felt with the way it was set up that it wasn't sustainable. So they asked us to take a look at how we schedule and look at academic recovery time. So at Bala Cynwyd, we are looking at proposing a slight change in terms of the schedule. And I know it's different, but if you look up here, it's a summary of what we're looking at. If you consider it through a 6-day cycle, it is adjusting the periods from 3 days with 50 minutes to 3 days with 43 minutes, with then academic recovery on only 3 of those days, to moving academic recovery or learn to 4 days out of the 6-day cycle. What this would allow us to do at Bala Cynwyd is, because of how we use academic recovery or learn, it would allow us to maintain what we have and how we use that period, but at the same time provide further opportunity for students in terms of choice, focusing time with the students in terms of the learning, and addressing what their needs are. In terms of the adjustment of times, what we did in looking at the schedule, we looked at delivery of when we're doing announcements, how we're doing announcements, how much time that takes. We also looked at, there was, let me say, unequal distribution of the time throughout the day with the periods. So we more equally distributed that and adjusted the periods to reflect as such, where it would be 4 days of 40 minutes of academic recovery time. We are also looking, again, to maximize that time and also keep, in terms of how we use it, and the least impact in terms of students with learning through different periods, moving that time to the end of the day, which is consistent with Welsh Valley. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Monday. So for the high school level, Scott and I are going to talk about what we've been thinking about and working on for the year. And I want to give you a little bit of a historical background to this. So when you're looking at the high school schedule, we've been in conversations with kids, specifically after some studies about stress and needing time. And time keeps coming up as a major issue for our students, as they are involved in so much after school, they're involved so much during the school day, and how do we provide them some opportunities? So relating to the strategic plan, specifically the bold statements 1 and 4, redefining success, and some self-directed learning, we looked at how we're using the time during the school day currently. And how are we using the resources we have, and how can we maximize that use of those resources? So this is a major schedule shift. It's moving of time around to see what we have. So that's the current Lower Merion and Harriton High School. So to give you some background, back in 2005, we had a scheduling committee we began what they called the Two Schools Project. And out of that, we created a schedule because both high schools wanted to be on the same schedule, sharing staff, better use of our resources at that time. And this was the outcome of that. Actually, I should rephrase that. The outcome was the rotation and looking what it does, except advisory and academic recovery. And to answer Marcy's question, that actually came out of the committee. The term was coined from the committee. I don't specifically know how, but that committee coined the term academic recovery. Former social studies teacher, I just thought I'd throw that out there. So what happened at that time in 2007 was we had academic and recovery and advisory. Advisory was 2 days in the middle of the day for about 20-some minutes, and academic recovery was 2 days. At the end of that year in 2007, 2008, there were some things going on. We were about to build 2 new high schools. Harriton was starting first, Lower Merion was second. Then we also noticed from the kids and the teachers, the timings were different of that year. You had a 45-minute class, a 55-minute class, and a 75-minute class. So from the surveys we did with the students and the teachers, we came back with, let's make everything 55 minutes. And then the talk was, students were saying, we need more academic recovery time than we did advisory. And that was a discussion. What really moved the discussion was the fact that we were building 2 new high schools with no fields, and we needed to get all of the athletes off of the campus at the end of the day in the time period. So that was where we moved things at the end of the day. It was beneficial to all of our resources, and it seemed to be the most logical thing to do at the time. So that is where the schedule has remained during that time period. It occurs, our academic recovery, soon to be learned, occurs at the end of a school day. It's 25 minutes during 3 out of the 4-day cycle. Every student has the same level of choice for support. We have a program that we use where students or teachers can sign students up. And the student is usually locked into one thing at the time and doesn't have too much movement in and out of that period or time period. So what are some challenges with what we currently have in using that? Well, as we know from more and more from the research, the end of the school day is definitely less conducive to student learning. It's been a long day. Sometimes it does not occur daily, so it's 3 out of the 4 days because we have an academic or because we have an advisory period the other time. Supports are not always differentiated by student. Sometimes the choices are limited. Student athletes over the time period have not been able sometimes because of where they pulling them out for leaving early for athletic events. And we're not using all of the resources that we have at the end of the day because of the way that the time shift works in terms of things of instructional assistance and everything else. So where we ended up, to say that there are things that we had to look at, there are some advantages to why we moved it at the end of the day too. It does allow early dismissals, have less impact on the last period. Teachers and students choose activities based on what the options that the teachers have out. Group sizes, because of the way we can control the program, we can limit the number of students a teacher can see at the end of the day. And it gives them the students, they can choose to visit the staff members whom they feel most of the time that they're most comfortable with. It might not be the staff member, though, that they really need to see. So with saying that there were some disadvantages, there's also some advantages of that day. But again, if you look at overall, where are we going and what do we need to make a better use of this time? And that's kind of where we are right now. So I'll let Scott.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So why are we looking at the change? We have discussed the strategic plan and how that's driven our thinking and trying to create more student-centered schools. That certainly is a big part of the reason. But as the Montgomery County Planning Commission just shared with us, the enrollment rising is inevitable. It will occur. And it will require us to change our bell schedule in some way. The current bell schedule that we have has a 3 lunch schedule, and with the capacity of the cafeterias increasing enrollment will not allow us to maintain the 3 lunch schedule with our current academic structure. The proposal allows us to maintain the academic schedule just as it is, so it has zero impact to the academic rotation, when classes meet, how frequently they meet, and their instructional minutes. But what really is the exciting part of it is the philosophical part of the change, about coming from a standpoint of trusting students and empowering students, and the belief that our students are going to rise to the occasion and use that time in a more profitable way for them and a more economical way for our staff. It's very aligned, the proposal, with the PLC model, as the middle school principals were sharing. It's similar for the very same reason for the high schools. So here's a quick look at the schedule, and as you look at it, there are a couple things that will stand out. One is that there is a block of time in the middle of the day called Lunch and Learn, and that occurs every single day. So that is a change as opposed to a learn time, which we currently call Academic Recovery, or RAM, at Harriton. Only occurs 3 out of 4 days. Lunch and Learn would occur daily, and it would be the same. It would be an hour daily. And during that time, everyone in the building, staff and students, would both have learn time and have time to eat. And so we want to make sure that that's very clear, that every student, while the time will be structured for some students, every student will have the opportunity for a 30-minute lunch period during every single school day. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the details about the schedule. So if you say, first of all, like, what is it? On a big picture, it's different. It's different than what we're used to. It's like I said, comes from like a perspective and standpoint of trust. And during that hour of time, there are no classes held, no traditional classes held during that hour for any students. All students and staff eat during that hour. Staff is assigned collaboratively with them. In other words, the staff will determine, we'll work with this on a rotating basis as far as what staff is available to students. For the first 30 minutes, which staff is available for students for the second 30 minutes. But the important thing is all hands are on deck. So you'll have counselors, you'll have faculty members, you have your instructional assistants available for minimally half of that time to support student learning. And students will have the right to choose the options during that time. Well, they do have the opportunity to choose now. They currently make one choice. So they choose one location to go, and they stay in that location for the entire time of academic recovery, or RAM. With this proposal, students would have the opportunity during that hour of time to structure it in a way that he or she feels fit. So theoretically, a student could visit their chemistry teacher for 10 minutes. They could go to lunch for 20 minutes. They could go to the library for quiet time for 15 minutes, and they could go at the end, the last portion of the hour, to see another teacher that's available that second half. They would have the opportunity to move multiple times and really pursue the help that they would feel would be best for them. So as far as what options are available for students, cafeteria obviously is an opportunity for them to eat at any point within that hour. They would have access to multiple teachers. They could go to the library, which would be open the entire hour. We would also set up silent study areas. That's something that really we've heard very clearly from students, that while they value the academic recovery and RAM time currently, finding a quiet place to study and sit just collect your thoughts or work or study on your own is sometimes challenging, because they have to sign up to go somewhere. So having silent study areas would be an option for them. We'd also have fitness areas throughout the building, and if weather permitting, outside for students. Art, music, family, consumer science, engineering, all your special areas would be open, or students could choose to have downtime. We're also working with both schools. Both high schools are created collaborative spaces both in the library and at places around the building where students can get together to academically collaborate. It should be noted that of the options and the trust that we are options for students and the trust we have in them, that trust will remain on campus. So we are expecting students to stay on campus during that time. So while we do empower them to make good, healthy decisions, we're going to provide a lot of choices for them on campus. So the proposal includes students earning the right to choose. And we anticipate most of our students falling in the third of those three categories, which is choice, meaning they would have the time to have autonomy for that hour of time during lunch and learn. Other students, based on their on their performance, may have some limited choices, making sure that they do visit with some academic teachers during that time. And we'd have hopefully a small number and a fluid number of students that would be on what we would call supervised status. And those students, for a variety of reasons, may need an intense level of support, of academic support in one particular subject, or it may be a will issue where students perhaps didn't finish, weren't completing homework, and there would be a supervised area for them to make sure that those tasks were completed. Those students would have a 30-minute block of their hour assigned, and the other 30 minutes they would have opportunity to make sure they could eat lunch. We see a lot of advantages to this. Many of the advantages are similar to what Mr. Hall and Mr. Potton were sharing, that allows us to more systematically intervene with students and target instruction. We think it's a big advantage that it's offered daily. Just from interacting with students, they are disappointed on days that they need to see teachers and don't have that time based on advisory. And I personally don't like the fact that it's advisory and academic recovery or RAM is an either or for them. Those two should be able to coexist and be beneficial for students, and we wouldn't want them to be in place of one another. We would make a really solid commitment to this time being available for students and that have opportunities for them, and make sure that we keep that time relatively sacred and not schedule meetings during that time, not pull staff. That's a time for downtime for students, and we want to obviously honor and dignify the lunch time that our staff needs as well. We also see it as an advantage that while there is a schedule change, it's a minimal effect to the academic schedule, and instructional minutes do not decrease. But one of the things that I think is really important when we look at the advantages is hearing from the schools that have adopted this program is that there's just a different effect on student stress levels and building climate. And there's something and it was hard to quantify, there's just something to a feeling when everyone is off at one time in the building. Hearing from our students and how our students push themselves, and that being one of the great qualities of our district, we also we want to encourage balance, and we want to encourage healthy options for students, and we think this schedule lends itself to that. We see there to be a lot of benefits to staff being the opportunity to have cross-curricular dialogue and interdepartmental mingling, and it lends itself to transformative interdisciplinary curriculum with the opportunity to collaborate during lunchtimes. We have that whole block of time which we could use staff very strategically. We also, I don't want to minimize this advantage either. We hear from students frequently the challenges of currently we eat lunch out of a set, so students have a academic class during their lunch set, and either the first third of it, the second third, or the third third. If that happens to be a testing period, that lunch block, sometimes in the middle of that set, can be disruptive and not ideal for testing. So that would no longer be an issue, which we see as an advantage. We have been in open dialogue with the schools that have tried this, and they were very forthright in the challenges, and there are challenges to every schedule, advantages and challenges. One of the major challenges, and I'll start with actually the second bullet there, is kind of the term managed chaos is how those schools referred to it, and that sometimes can hear that and you get a little nervous perhaps as being a school administrator or someone responsible for a level of control in the building. And challenge school administration to kind of temper your expectations of building norms. During this time, students are moving. There's a lot of movement. There's more traffic in the hallways. Students are moving from room to room. You slightly reduce your expectations on where food can be in the building, and so offer some flexibility with that. So it really is making a commitment with that trust that we're offering students. We're asking in return certainly a commitment to respecting our school facility and maintaining the wonderful facilities that we have. We have a terrific support staff, custodial staff that keeps our buildings very, very clean. They do a terrific job, and we certainly want our students and staff to commit to honoring that. And just another challenge of this is kind of reconsidering and revisiting our emergency procedures. And we spoke with schools about that, how they've done that. We have a kind of a blueprint and plan for how that would look. And we certainly think this is we can manage this, but what does a lockdown look like during that time? What does a fire drill look like during that time? And it will be a challenge for us to kind of work with our students and re-norm what that would look like for them. And that the first fear that seems to pop into people's mind is, what will everyone flood to the cafeteria right away, and what can the cafeteria manage that flow? A very real concern. The responses that we got from the schools that have tried this is that there is, especially early in the year, the first few days, there is kind of students have to get used to the flow, the natural flow, and then it kind of falls into rhythm. And there are times when students know there are busier times. There are times when you be able to perhaps visit with a teacher first and then go to the cafeteria. But I can tell you that now we have 30-minute lunches, and students do not spend 30 minutes eating during that time. They spend that 30 minutes of time in the lunchroom, but they don't spend it eating the whole time. So we don't think that there's going to be a challenge with having students have the time to eat. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was fantastic. Open it up for questions from the board. I know the curriculum committee had a chance to hear the presentation, so would love to hear some of the feedback from the committee as well as other folks. Oh, please.
Thank you again for the presentation, and we did hear this presentation last Monday, so we appreciate it. It gets better every time, so sounds great. So after I heard this presentation, I was talking to a couple of high school students, and I said, hey, this sounds, what do you think of this? And they were very excited about it. And I realized I hadn't listened as carefully as I should have, because they had some questions that I couldn't answer, and I think I now have the answer. But during this is for lunch and learn. This is high school. During the high school period, so it won't be that students are assigned, a particular half hour to do lunch and then a particular half hour to do whatever else you want. It really is that full time is going to be open to them to structure it. Is that correct?
That's correct for most of the students. There'll be some students that would have 30 minutes assigned, 30 minutes lunch.
Based on where a staff person's schedule would be. So if a staff person was having lunch the first half hour, a student might need to go see them the second half hour. Is that the?
Correct. We would revisit that regularly, and that would be based on their student performance. So if they were, for example, failing a class and needed additional support, they may have a more structured schedule of time. We would revisit that, and students would have the opportunity to earn the right to have more choice during that time. But overwhelmingly, our students during that hour would have control over that hour as they see fit without having to sign up.
And will the staff have their lunchtime fixed, or do they also?
We would. We have the flexibility to revisit that as regularly as we need to. We plan on being very transparent with students and publishing that daily to say these are the available teachers during this 30 minutes, these are the available teachers during that 30 minutes, and so we want to have a balance of physics teachers available the first half an hour and physics teachers available the second half an hour. So we would have a chance to make sure that could be fluid, which we view as an advantage.
Thank you.
Please. Did you want to take questions on the high school piece first, or
No,
both,
ask the
either one?
question.
Okay, so first I want to comment on the tremendous commitment you have to our students, that principals will get up and say, I'd like more chaos in the schools. I think it's absolutely fabulous, and
Thank you.
you guys are great. My question was actually, my question for you guys was, the aides that currently sort of monitor, how will their roles change, and do you have the opportunity to train them, and what sort of development goes along with people who are monitoring the situation?
Well, that depends on what the roles of the instructional aides are. Some work specifically with certain students, others support programs, like a learning support program, for example. So we would envision having those instructional aides align with the program that they're already trained for and most closely aligned with. So we don't anticipate that being a challenge. But having them available during that time, one of the disadvantages now is at the end of the day, we don't have all of our instructional aides available during that time. So would be a better use of our resources.
We have to stagger their starts now.
I had a question for the middle school, but I don't want them to have to jump up and down. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so the other the question I have was the number of minutes for the learn time at each school seems to be different. Is there a philosophy difference there, or is that just logistics?
No, that's really just a function of having two middle schools with two slightly different schedules. The times are relatively equivalent right now, but not exactly the same.
And in terms of coming into complete alignment, without making significant programmatic changes right now, that would not be possible. So.
Dr. Earlier, I wanted to follow up and say that this is one of many shifts that we're going to look into, and in the coming years, we will be talking with this board and looking at the middle school schedule and looking at better ways to align that. So small steps, but we believe that, and we're committed to the 5-year strategic plan, saying that during that window, the middle school schedules are going to be positioned much better than they are right now. So we look forward to bringing those conversations to the board and into the community.
I had a similar question regarding the middle school schedules. It looked like there was additional time on the proposed schedule. How are you capturing, it looked like 20-plus minutes. Where is that coming from?
Well, in terms of where the time going from currently to where we are, yes, it's additional 20-some minutes. In looking at our current schedule, this periods, as Sean had said in terms of the high school, aren't all equal in time.
Okay.
So we redistributed that time so that it became more equal. We're also looking at how and when we deliver announcements, because that is a time that is, let me say, just where students are just sitting and listening, and that when that is delivered and how can be viewed differently.
Okay.
So
Great, thank you. Other questions, Ms. Powell?
I wanted to make a comment to thank you for, even though you're two separate middle schools, consolidating, so to speak, so that you're separate but almost equal, you know,
We're getting there.
so that the academic nuances of both schools are being met, you know, in a good manner. So thank you for that. Also for the high schools, and then this is a comment, thank you for all the work for all of middle school and high school, for the work you've done, you're doing, and will be doing for our young people. But one of the things that I loved about it is you have included the students, because many times adults make plans for students without including them, and they can be all wrong. So thank you for including our students. And also, my concern was with these lunch and learns, what happens to the students that are falling in the cracks and are not mature enough to be able to make decisions on their own? And I think you addressed it when you said, you know, did you say 1/3 or 3/3 would have choice, and then you have those that are monitored, and then you have those that are supervised, because high school is such an important time in a young person's life. If they fall further through the cracks at that time, then their future is really going to be challenged. So thank you for having, the wisdom to know that there's some students that still need to be supervised even in the high school situation.
Lori?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a follow-up from that, and you kind of all addressed this through the choice. But can you just give a little more detail about, like, what is your vision for what a high-performing student is doing this time? What's maybe a middle-of-the-road student doing during this time, and what's a student who needs extra engagement and help? Like, ideally, what is your vision? Can you just get a little more specific? I have my, premise of what they should be doing, but I'd love to hear from you. This is a ambitious thing, kind of what you'd like to see in a year after you launch this. And I mean, anyone can answer it, or, you don't have to all answer it, but I just want to get a little more picture of the end game.
I don't think that the schedule change itself is going to influence student behavior that much. So I think that our students that are highly ambitious, that really want to meet with teachers, that will soak up every minute with them, do that now, and they try to. Admirable that they do, try to get as much learning as they can during that window of time. So that time that they have is greater, and we want to. It's kind of hard to quantify what that would look like, but we would hope that.
Are all the AP calculus kids going to bum rush their teacher into giving them extra time because the test is coming up?
Well,
where they really maybe should be going out and playing tennis because they need to de-stress.
And so that's going to be something that we will not only encourage parents to speak with their kids, but we want to talk through with advisory, and we will speak with students about really empowering them to make healthy decisions. And we think that the structure lends itself to more choice for students, and much like they do now. Some students, even now when they have a scheduled lunch period and no other option, some students will choose to go to the library during that time and study as opposed to eat.
Right.
So it's not totally different. But we do feel like if you have an hour, you'll be more inclined to use at least some of that for downtime. And some of that time for eating, and I think that we'll find, from what we've heard from other schools, is that students will welcome that. So if you were to ask me what I would hope they would use some of that time for enrichment, some of that time to see the teachers they need, and also some of that time to really listen to their bodies and see what they need. And if that is downtime or quiet time, or just making sure you have a really healthy lunch, we hope that that's the avenue that students pursue.
Okay, that's helpful.
We're getting tight up here. I just wanted to add one thing to that. When we looked at this and we've talked to students about it, one of the things that is really works about this is that for those students who have those truly, and it's many of our students, crazy busy lives.
Right.
Where they are in school from
That's kind of
7:30 in
what
the
I'm
morning,
thinking about.
headed to sports after
Right.
school, or to the
Clubs.
play, or to TSA, or whatever it is. We've heard from a lot of other places that what this provides is a time to close your eyes. If you need to do that as a kid. We don't often see students doing that. As they get older, we see it more and more, and in college we see it all the time. But this allows for that. It allows for a student who, let's say, has a crazy busy schedule after school, who may not be getting home from crew practice till 9, 10 o'clock. They can get their homework done for a half an hour. And that's going to take a burden off of them in that way. So I think that there are just so many uses that for all different types of students during this time.
Right.
And for those students who are really struggling, as Mrs. Pollard said, their half hour will be structured. And then you hope that there's the incentive to do better because they would like the choice that they're seeing other students have around them. So I think it's a myriad of things that students could be doing during this time.
It's a formidable group to be asking questions to. But I guess I have two concerns that I raised at the CCOB meeting as well, and maybe I can articulate them a little better now. I guess my one concern is that you have two very admirable goals, and one is to create more academic time, and the other is to better address students' holistic needs. And I see them competing rather than this ideal that Mr. Eversole had, that they're going to be in synergy with each other. I guess my concern is that some students are going to use this time for more academic work, not taking the time to nap or detox or not do that, do yoga. What's the word? And then so that you have competing goals for this. And then my second concern, which also is a dichotomy, is that you view this as empowering students and trusting students and giving them more freedom, but yet for some subset of students it's going to be punitive. Their time is going to be prescribed, and I just worry about that creating this, widening the divide we already have in our high schools between the certain groups of students, that some students are gaining this freedom and other students are being punished. And rather than you view that as incentivizing them, they'll try hard so they have this free time, but I view it as just demoralizing them further.
So, as far as the students that would have the time prescribed to them, they would have more freedom. They'd have more freedom than they do now. So that every student is going to have a greater level of freedom that they would now. My response to that is our responsibility. And one of the things that I ethically wrestle with now with our current model is that students that do need help and do need additional level of support sometimes will choose options that don't give them that support, and the system allows for that to occur. And so while I think there's a value to teachers being available for students, a student to go to a teacher that they feel comfortable with, and I don't want to minimize that in any way. That's really important. Sometimes, if that's at the expense of the academic help they need, that doesn't always sit well with us. And so we view the opportunity to say there are a small number of students that we need to focus on and get them the help that they need, with the hope that they will welcome that assistance and improve their academic standing, and then have greater choice.
And I want to say this, that I think that former high school assistant principal, there is that balance, and we've always, with some of our not yet successful students, based on the measurements that we use to calculate, we are constantly having conversations about choice. And we've constantly say that we don't want to prescribe this. Provide us evidence of your ability to manage your time. The same way in terms of study hall. We don't want a teacher over your shoulder reading to you or advising you on programs. We want you to be independent. And there are some skill sets that, as every student travels through their journey, are at different points of that. And it's a gradual release and pull back, gradual release and pull back. But I also want to comment on the competing goals, and I absolutely agree with that. But it's very similar to Ms. Ackman's comments with regards to how we're going to ensure that with this time, you're not having the type A type of students doing that. And I think it falls to the first transformational shift in our strategic plan, and that is really redefining success. The same way when we have this conversation more in depth about time, hypothetically, if we chose to look at time very differently, it doesn't mean that students' behaviors are going to change. The time that we're giving them, they might realize, oh, I'm not going to rest, I'm just going to keep going. And I think that there are different programs and different structures that we have to put in place to make sure that all of these wheels are turning in the right direction. But I do agree with you, and that's something that we wanted to address in the first transformational or bold statement is that redefining success. This hour is not an extra opportunity for you to shut down and go deep into this and say, I'm going to sneak an hour more of studying or sneak an hour more of getting to my my teacher. We understand that might be needed, but it's really a time to pull back. And one of the things that you'll hear next year is, in order to do that, we're thinking differently about collaborative spaces and learning spaces for students. So as we're monitoring the high school and the middle school, and we're also thinking about elementary as well, that those spaces that students tend to navigate to, we want to make those learning experiences. And there are some spaces where students want to come down a certain part of the hallway, and that would be their, you know what, I need a Zen moment, for example, right? And other sections of the building will be other opportunities. So there's all these mechanisms in place that I think will help to deliver that maximum output.
So it's still on the same topic that we've been talking about, but currently, and Dr. Marseille touched on it, currently with study hall, well, is it second semester, sophomore year that you're then given the freedom to choose how you spend the time given your academic status and whatever? And I think that was done very intentionally to transition the kids into ninth grade, get them used to the system, and then as they become more familiar and independent, you give them a little more freedom. This throws ninth graders immediately into that freedom. And I'm wondering if there was any thought to transitioning ninth graders in a little more slowly, perhaps, than you do the rest of the students.
So it's a great question, and one that we discussed with the school that we visited in Virginia. They have a ninth grade transition program where the first 6 weeks of ninth grade students and all ninth graders did not have a choice, and they went through like almost like an orientation to high school and some study skills, and that's something that we're very, very intrigued by the notion of that, and just supporting the students as they transition to the high school. We don't have all of the details of that. And that's a more logistically complex issue, but we certainly want to include that longer term. We just have to figure it out.
Right. Good. Okay. And then, do you have any plan or thought in place for evaluating the efficacy of this change? So have some way, even if it's just through surveys of the students, there might not be a way to get a hard number on that, but a way of evaluating whether this is actually a positive change.
We have talked about that a lot, actually, and that would be we would surveys with students and teachers. The benefit of this is because we're not really changing, we're moving time around. That if we got through and looked at this at the end of each quarter, doing an 8-week cycle and see how it goes. It's not much of a change to go back. So it's, again, you're moving one part to the bottom, to the middle, and then you can go back and do the same thing. So the talk has been, if we went by a quarter, 8 to 9 weeks, and took a look at both staff and student surveys to see where we are, and then make some decisions logistically for that.
That sounds
but
great.
it's not something we have to, if things aren't where we want it to be, it's not something that we would have to wait till a following school year to figure out.
I wanted to touch up on the survey question, because it is a lifeline for the strategic plan. In the language of the strategic plan, we wanted to be very mindful in terms of the analytics and the surveys in which we conduct. We understood that one of the challenges with the 2009 plan was not having those matrices or systems in place during that time, and then we found ourselves chasing it.
Right.
And that made it much more difficult to gather that. So the administration, Ms. Hockfield's leadership, has been working really hard to make sure that as we move into these prototype phases, that hopefully we apply a really robust system. Matter of fact, the success of the plan depends on that, because many of the questions will be, they've always been with this board, being on top of the things we do, is how do we know this is successful? How we're going to measure this, how we're going to check that, and provide some information for you, as opposed to trying to go through with it and then try to find a system. So we are looking at a better way of monitoring those 5 bold statements and getting some baseline data first, and constantly making sure that, and with Dr. Golden's response several months ago, and I remember this, was really about the validity and reliability of some of the questions that we ask, all right? So even though it's not going to be published in AERA, right? Who knows? But we did want to make sure that Laura Marion continues to ensure that much of the work is aligned to best practices in research, so we are looking for a system that provides us with that type of robust system.
That's great. And one thing I would suggest, and you've probably already thought of this, but I'll say it anyway, is that with the change of moving the RAM period, or whatever, to the middle of the day instead of the end of the day, there's going to be an increased burden on the students who do leave school early, because they're going to be missing more classes. And so when you look at your evaluation of whether it's a successful program or not, I'd ask you to take a very careful look at whether it has increased the pressure on those students, or whether it's a manageable change. I mean, in any given season, it's not like every game you're getting dismissed early, but it can be a lot, and sometimes it can be a lot in one week.
We are keenly aware of that element, because that is the element that will most directly and negatively affect students. And so we heard that from students, and we've heard it from staff as well. So that's really one of the focal points as we reflect.
And thinking logistically, how, for meeting with the athletic directors, what are the right times to leave, and can we cut back on some of that, and how do we, so I mean, that's administrative stuff that we need to look at.
We also, we also think that Blackboard is going to play a great role in that. We don't have currently a great management tool, an online management tool that's interactive with students. The addition to Blackboard in our pilot year next year, and then the following year, will give students many more opportunities than they have right now to access work that they miss through a learning management system.
So then, and lastly, I have a question, building specific for the 2 high schools. First, Sean, if the enrollments continue to grow at the rate that they're projected, you're going to be spilling into this building fairly soon. And have you given thought to how you're going to manage this chaos with the 2 buildings as opposed to having just the one? Are you going to try and keep everybody in the one building for the hour? Do you have a plan yet?
No, we actually just started a meeting talking to the architect of what this building would look like. So part of that discussion is how would we manage? It would be impossible with those numbers that were just presented in one building. So we'd have to, and plus we'd have faculty over here that kids would need to see. So we're going to have to figure out how we would station campus aides and systems throughout, so that it's an easy flow back and forth. But it's not an easy flow off of the campus.
Right. So that could be a big challenge. And then my Harrington-specific question is, so the population at Harrington isn't projected to tip very high for another couple of years yet. So you have a couple of years before you have the pressure on the lunch periods. If you had your choice, would you keep your current schedule for a couple more years, or are you anxious and looking forward to switching to this new one?
Anxious. So, I mean, we think that, philosophically it's more aligned with what we believe in, with how the strategic plan is driving us. We actually think it's the opportune time to work through this now, with the enrollment being smaller. And one of the things that's great about this is there is a lot of flexibility and a lot of opportunities to revisit how we use that hour. If we're finding that areas there are too many open areas for food use, then we have an opportunity to adjust that at any point. If we have a disproportionate number of students that are on supervised status, we have the ability to adjust. So much like the Planning Commission, we will revisit this regularly at no charge. At no charge. But we think that the model kind of allows us to look at it flexibly.
Great, thanks.
Following up on that, though, I thought that you were going to allow the students to be out, like, using the facilities as well, like fields, I assume even the pool. I thought that was part of the plan, so that they would be, not the pool.
The pool will be
No,
interesting.
sorry. All right.
Not to speak from the pool
I
community,
think I was
that will
asked
probably
that,
speak.
I think I was
from-
asked that question too, and I said I didn't know. I should have
the
just
pool will be
said
a
no.
tough one.
No, but in terms of,
Well, sure. I mean, yeah,
that
we
was
don't
part of the
want,
plan, right?
the idea is to use the
Okay.
facilities that we have, but it also means that we still have to monitor the students,
No,
coming back
clearly,
out.
right, absolutely.
And I just want to add a comment to what Scott was saying. Education, the downfall of education, it takes a long time sometimes to change things, right? We ring bells to start learning and to end learning. When you have opportunities like this, and if you don't take them, I think you're missing out on things. And the ability that, lots of times when we get to a schedule and we think that's fine, leave it that way. And I think that's what happened after 2008 was we never went back and revisited it. And hearing that you're going to do and we're going to do surveys and come back and keep revisiting things, that's what sparks the interest and sparks the initiatives and makes us feel like, all right, we're actually then, moving forward in a direction, whether it's positive or negative. And I agree wholeheartedly with Scott. If you don't attempt it, you don't know. And I think, we want to teach kids, you have to face those types of challenges in life too, and no negative to stop back, but to do it. And I think it's the same for what the middle school's suggesting. So.
Any more questions? Okay. Oh, my goodness.
Just before we end this discussion, can I just say the word I was looking for was decompress? I just want, since this is televised.
That's okay.
Did you have anything to add before?
No, well, I just really wanted to thank Ms. Hockfield for her leadership and in this and the principals as well. It's not easy to work with me sometimes, and when we go into the situation room, which is what we call it, and that think tank room, and we ask this really broad question. I want you to think differently about time. I want to know what that looks like, not only from an academic perspective, from a holistic perspective. And, that fundamental question really just started the hard work that happens, these guys. And Ms. Hockfield and her team, churned through that process. And I'm really glad that this is one of many phases that we look forward to sharing with the public and with the community. We have some great things happening at our elementary that we're really excited that Dr. Doria is working on. So we're really excited next year to kind of give you updates on that as well, because we did say that the success of the strategic plan is deeply rooted on the way in which things occur and the experiences that elementary students are having. So as you think about this strategic plan, and I know that the middle and high schools presented today, it is not absent of the work that is happening and the way we're thinking differently at the elementary school as well, because we know that's an integral part of the success of the plan. So we have a lot of goodies that we're really excited as we're working through to share with you and in the community in the coming years. So we're really excited, but I really did want to publicly thank all of you guys for taking that big prompt and doing such a phenomenal job and talking to students, which is a key part of this strategic plan. And to your point, Ms. Pollard, oftentimes, and I say this to students, we make decisions for students, about students, but rarely bring them in the conversation in the planning phase. And we're happy that this strategic plan calls for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'd like to move now to audience recognition. If you are interested in speaking, please sign in with Ms. LaPera and tell us your name, general place of residence in the district, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Before the principals leave, I'd just like to make a comment. Okay? I know that it's a long day. My name is Ruth Jenkin. I live at the corner of Worcester Road and Hamilton, where every day I deal with about 20 students who are smoking and are coming in and out of the high school, obviously at will. I did speak to them because my entire front grass area was covered with cigarettes and soda cans, et cetera, and so was my neighbor across the street. And I did speak to them several times, and they're very nice. I mean, they're certainly very respectful of me and my dog, who now thinks they're part of the family and part of the walk. I did have a long conversation about them about if this was their neighborhood, would they want this to be part of that? And, you know, the school is my neighborhood, and I think it's important that if you're going to create an opportunity for students to be freer, that with that has to come a discussion of citizenship, of stewards of the neighborhood, and that's what I've been talking to them about. And I actually put a pail with sand for them to put their cigarettes in, which they've been doing. So I just wanted to let you know that if there's going to be this freedom, which there isn't now, and obviously there is, they have assumed the freedom, that one should be aware of what goes on in the surrounding neighborhood. I'm also concerned about the traffic again, you know, bringing in that traffic and bringing the kids from one building to the other and having them kind of wandering off a little bit. That's basically my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. I appreciate that, and we will make sure that we look into that. In the meantime, as we try to do that, remove that pail because they're no longer going to be there.
So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming.